Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, and joining me this morning is Jaide Chyzyk.
Chyzyk, that's right. It's like
Oh.
the Ukrainian sneeze. Chyzyk.
I got it right on the first try.
You did.
Oh, that's awesome. So this morning we're going to be talking to Jaide. She's a new addition here at Clair-i-tea, but she's also doing lots of work on her own. So Jaide is a transformative coach and intuitive channeler who bridges the realms of science and spirituality to guide individuals in rewriting their stories and healing their inner child. She specializes in personalized readings, hypnotherapy, nervous system regulation, stress management, trauma healing, PTSD recovery, and anxiety relief. That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. It is a mouthful.
Yeah, so it also says in her bio that she empowers clients to uncover the root causes of their challenges and connect to their most authentic expression and rewire their minds for embodied confidence and success. So, Jaide, let's start off and maybe you can just tell people a little bit about yourself and how you actually went on this journey and what happened. What's your story?
What's my story?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a much longer conversation, but
Well,
in the
it was
Coles
the
Notes,
Coles Notes.
the Coles Notes version.
Yeah, exactly.
The Coles Notes version would be that I was born into, we'll call it, a series of unfortunate events. And though the path was super, I can't really say there's really anything extra special about my story in the sense that everybody goes through some pretty high impact trauma, and I went through a lot of high impact trauma, which would be considered chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Like the CPTSD, and I had that diagnosis by the time I was about 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was diagnosed with a panic disorder as well. And for those of you who don't know what a panic disorder is, it's much different than an anxiety disorder. This is, like an anxiety disorder on steroids. It puts you in a space where you're like immobilized in an actual panic.
Yeah, like you actually freeze.
Absolutely can't move. You're hyperventilating. Sometimes you think you're gonna die. Mm-hmm. It's pretty tragic. Like when you think about a young child having that. My son is turning 10 this Sunday, mm-hmm. and I could not imagine having to hold space for such a big experience, let alone multiple times a day.
Yeah.
So I was told that I would have to be medicated for these things for the rest of my life, mm-hmm. which I remember thinking at that age how brutally unfair and unnecessary that sounded mm-hmm. to me. I was like, wait, but the circumstances that led up to this point were not my fault.
Right.
And I was very aware of that. So why do I have to live with this thing for the rest of my life?
Why do I have to serve the consequences of that experience?
Yeah, it's like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Back then, also mental health and awareness, especially around, abuse recovery, things like that. It was very, very minimal, we were about really as dialed into that as we see the New Age section and chapters at that time, mm-hmm. which was like 5 books long,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We weren't there yet. So I went through what we would call conventional Western healing mm-hmm. for a long period of time, up until I was about 15, when I just said I had enough. Mm-hmm. And I cut and carved my own path, mm-hmm. and I left home and I went medication free, and it was a journey. I just taught myself from the inside out, read all these books around psychology, read all these books around like breath, around everything that I would need to know about how my body and my brain works. Mm-hmm. I'm very inquisitive that way. So I just asked a lot of questions mm-hmm. so that I could figure out my own lens of how to view my body, view my brain, and heal this thing that I didn't really think that I needed to live with for the rest of my life.
So you got into this as a self-healing journey, basically.
100%.
And now you're taking all the skills and things that you've learned in order to help other people.
Absolutely. Especially because I find that Western medicine has its place, and I will never, I'm never going to be this person that just completely shits on or discredits it. I think that a time and a place for all sorts of modalities,
Right.
and what works for one doesn't work for others. I would never advise anybody to go down the path that I went, to leave home as a teenager and throw out medication, and that's not everybody's journey for sure. But what I could advise is that, it's a different story when we start looking intuitively about what's right for us and asking the right questions, and questioning what is just given to us or prescribed to us or asked of us based on one narrative of a diagnosis and one narrative of a healing journey.
Well, thank you very much for being a brave soul going down that path.
Thank you. Lots of, like I said, lots of people do. I really believe that a lot of people do, and a lot of people just don't know.
Well, I think that's where greatness comes from too. It's like when you're faced with these circumstances, then it's in the overcoming of them that creates that greatness and your impact on the rest of the world, right? And that's when they talk about shining your light. That's what we're here to do. So it takes a lot of shedding the darkness. They're turning the light on in the darkness to find that. So
I would agree with that. It's, I'll say there's a lot of harder choices, in that, because it does require you to know your shadow. It does require you to take radical self-responsibility and self-accountability. And sometimes when you think you got it all figured out, you're humbled by the fact that, of course, you don't until you figure out that you're just kind of like, all right, well, I know that I don't have it all figured out, but it does require a lot of humility, because these types of, journeys really impact and the ego in certain ways, right? Whether those are your defense mechanisms, the triggers, the reactions, whether they were your fault or not, it's yours to manage and deal with. And there's no shame in getting support. There's no shame in asking questions. And there's also no shame in getting it wrong. I think shame is really, and what we make these things mean often times, is what debilitates people, because, they go down the spiral and they think, shit, I had it figured out. I thought I was over this.
Yeah.
There's layers, and different circumstances bring up different things. If we can eliminate shame from that, then we have a much different narrative.
I like what human design says about shame, actually. The way through shame is laughter and humor. So, if we can work through things and actually find the humor in it and play like a child, right, then it's easier to keep going, and discovering yourself and discovering all the joys that life has for us, right?
I personally agree very much. I also know that the level of humor I have over some of the darkness I've overcome is not for everyone. My humor is not for everyone. Completely.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what kinds of services you're going to offer here at Clair-i-tea, so that people are familiar with what they can come in and receive from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so as you know, I've got quite a bit of background in certain certifications, and I weave a lot of those things together to create something that's really unique to the individual. And that's sometimes I find very challenging to say, okay, I can label it this, but then I know that it's a much bigger container than that. It is customized to the individual. So first of all, I'm a certified hypnotherapist or rapid transformational therapist, which specializes in a type of hypnotherapy that helps with phobias, fears, post-traumatic stress, nervous system, all the things that are more, we'll say, science-based. Yeah. So I offer that, and I do think that it's such a crucial foundation to expansion in your spirituality, because if you don't have a regulated nervous system, or you're still living in these fears and these phobias, it's very challenging for us to open and expand in a grounded way, where we can pull through our gifts and have them in a stable, consistent way. And then outside of that, I also offer neuro-linguistic programming, which is around rewiring the brain, identifying limiting beliefs, identifying all those different areas of habits and patterns that are not serving you versus being able to shift that present state of being to the desired state of being.
So cool.
Really cool stuff. Really cool. And that, in itself can be really magical, even though it is science-based. There's so much richness in the spirituality and the principles that are taught to it that make it accessible for those who struggle to work with some of these other mindsets, we'll say, of how it works to be in a really good exchange with the universe. And then I obviously specialize in inner child transformation. I typically will only hold those in longer containers, like the 6-week one that's coming up. And then obviously I do the oracle readings with channeling. So
can you tell us a little bit more about channeling? Because I find that lots of people don't understand exactly what channeling is, and like what the benefits are and what kind of information they can get when they're doing the oracle with the channeling.
Yeah, that's fair. Everybody kind of has their own flavor, I feel like, right? Depending on who you're going to. And I think that's really the important thing to understand is like we're all channelers, right? We all are here in this radio receiver, and some of us are tuned to a different, we're just tuned a little differently, and we have access to information that we're a little more practiced in receiving, we'll say.
Well, I think some people are channelers, but totally unaware that they're actually channeling the information as well. Because if you don't know what your gifts are, then
it gets confused.
It gets confused.
Fear and intuition are often the two things that bump up against each other, and they can sound very similar for people who are not practiced in their gifts. So first of all of us are channelers. All of us have these really unique gifts. It's just about discovering how we utilize those gifts, whether, we're clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, all the different clairs. But for channeling, I guess like for me, channeling with the oracle cards is I combine these two areas based on your questions to pull the information that is relevant. And the way that I pull information is just automatic downloads, and I get the information and it just streams through. Very much a consistent flow and streaming through of information.
Yeah, so it can also include things like, mediumship where people have crossed over.
Yes.
It can include, information about, you're asking a question about, should I move, that kind of stuff. And
Absolutely.
You'll be getting information about that. So there's a wide range that the channeling,
it's so expensive.
Yeah, it's so expensive.
So
I find sometimes tarot card readings very limiting, but when you actually open up and you start channeling, you get all kinds of information that you wouldn't get with just the cards. Yeah.
All kinds. I've had, people's, passed away puppies just roll up and thing, their galactic guides come hanging in, and I'm like, okay. I remember sitting in to do with an NLP session with one of my clients, and instead I got a high pitched ringing in my ear, and instead she brought everyone. She brought everyone. She came in and everyone, and literally the dog wanted to talk to her. And it was perfect because I was like, hey, do you mind if we shift? Because I have some other things that are coming forward, and then of course we can get into the NLP session. But there's somebody asking permission. I was like, are you open and in a place to receive? Something else. And she was, and it was perfect. It literally ended up being exactly, I had no idea that she'd been trying to connect with her galactic guides. She had this retreat with her that passed away.
Nice.
It's really neat because the channeling does include everything, and it's neat. You never really know what you're gonna get.
Exactly. You get what they want you to hear.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So maybe we can just get back to the inner child for a little bit, because I really want people to understand what the inner child work is and what this program is, because I think it's very valuable, and there's a lot of people that could benefit from it. So can you just, first of all, explain what inner child work is, and then maybe tell us a little bit about the program that you've developed that's coming up, I believe, in October?
Yeah, October 10th is when we start. Yeah, and the early bird cutoff is at the end of August. So, the inner child, this is a huge conversation. Yeah. It is the conversation if, we really want to get into it. everything that we have built within the first 26 years of life, in my opinion, in my training, is our inner child. Our brain is still developing at this phase. Our neuroplasticity, we say, oh, we're still picking things up like a sponge. Your brain has not even finished developing fully between the ages of 26 and 30%, depending on the different person. So, we're looking at these first experiences that really impact the deepest levels of our subconscious
and who we're going to be.
And who we are going to be, and really what our beliefs are, right? So, I believe that we can all change, and yet fundamentally the way that we view the world will be impacted by this period of time, right? Whether we are, and we're always looking for evidence to support our beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's really important to know what those beliefs are. How do I see the world? What is the way that my viewpoint of myself, the way I engage with the world, the way I play in this world, the way I create in this world is? And a lot of us have been robbed of our creativity, have been robbed of our capacity to actually play and create, and to recognize ourselves as creators.
Well, I think that's hilarious because, even, going back to biblical text, it's like through the eyes of a child, and it's through the play of the child, right? That all of this comes out through your magic. That's where your genius is, right? So I find this so fascinating.
I love it because this program really bridges the science and the spirituality of it. I have a lot of people that go, why can't I manifest what I want? Why can't I get what I want? What, like everything that I'm trying to, have, I can't hold, right? And a lot of the times, like the universe is always providing us with opportunities. And yet, if we're so focused on these other beliefs that we sort of have these horse blinders on, and we miss sometimes the cues for those opportunities, or we miss these things that may have these open doors, right, that are there for us. And then there's other times where certain beliefs are like waiting for the other shoe to drop, for example, right? So we'll get this thing that we really want, and yet we have this sort of nagging thing that's just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then of course, boom, the thing that we want falls through our hands.
Right.
And this is to not say that you have to eliminate fully these beliefs that you have in order to expand, or in order to enjoy, or to raise the quality of your life, but that it's super important for us to be aware of them, so that we can have the courage to work through them, because fear is there, right? It's a core element, right, of the human experience. And it teaches us a lot, but our relationship directly with how we engage with our beliefs, how we're aware of these beliefs, how we know ourselves through these core fundamental times is so important in terms of how we're going to manifest, how we're going to live our life, and how we're going to choose to make the changes that are suitable for us, rather than continuing to live in pain. So I would say that if we're going to have a conversation about the inner child, that it is the foundation of everything that will create the rest of your life.
Right.
And if you've got this inner child that's running around rampant with its own ideas, and has no guidance, and no ability to really reparent what that looks like, or to hold space for what that looks like, then there's going to be challenges. There's going to be big challenges, and you're not going to understand why. And you're going to be battling that version of you, or silencing that version of you, or whatever it might be. And oftentimes we do that, we're like, we silence this part of ourselves, and then we wonder why we never feel safe to speak our truth, right? Because we've been silencing this little version of us that,
since we were little,
that really has something to say. So I feel like it's a lot of parts work. It's a lot of dialoguing. It's a lot of investigation of, okay, well, what are my beliefs, and where did they come from? When did they start? How are they serving me now? And can I make sustainable changes in how I interact with these parts of myself, without shaming them, silencing them, or being really mean to them?
I think sometimes it's just recognizing that that's part of your experience, right? And going, okay, I accept that was part of my experience, but I don't have to live like that anymore. I can change. I do have the power to shift that. And I think that a lot of people just keep telling that story over and over and over again from when they were a child, right? And yeah, I have a personal experience with my brother being a victim all his life, and he could never get out of that. Like, and it's just like it's like a program, and it just runs, and they automatically respond to every situation with that damage that they had when they were younger. So I see this work that you're doing is very valuable.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is a program. You said it, you hit it on the head. What is the program that's installed and was installed on my behalf? And now what can I do to rewrite that program in a way that it serves me? And a big key part that we go through in this program is rewriting our story, not in a way to bypass it or say that it didn't exist, but to shift our narrative about what we're making it mean, right? And the other part is acceptance, radical self-acceptance, and self-responsibility and self-accountability for these parts, that are now our mess to clean up.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is when you said our mess to clean up is like people get stuck in this thing like, well, that's me. I can't change that. But it is our responsibility to empower ourselves and to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and not be going around blaming our past or what happens to us. It's all about how we respond and how we move on from there. How do we react to that circumstance? And yeah, the 0 point that we talk about, right, is so important in that. But so maybe you can tell everybody like when it's being offered and what kinds of things they'll get out of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a 6-week program, and it starts October 10th and ends November 14th. It's once a week for 90 minutes. If you can't make it live, then of course you can watch the replay. There will be little exercises to do on a day-to-day basis. It also comes with some things that are personalized just to you and for you and your inner child. So that's what makes every container very unique in that way, is that there is certain aspects that are customized to the individual that's coming in. What we'll learn a lot about is like how I really like to explain to people and educate people like how trauma actually works, how these things actually work inside your body, inside your brain, and how those things go in connecting with the spirit. So we're really educating people on their own body, their own brain, and how they can learn how to hack their own nervous system so that they can actually create a solid foundation. Because the reality is that healing work it doesn't work if you don't have a regulated nervous system.
Yeah.
All right. If you don't know how to soothe yourself, which most of us actually don't. We're not taught that at all.
Yeah. And most of us don't have like spiritual practices. And then I find that there's a lot of people out there, I don't know if you find this too, but they say they're spiritual and they're on a spiritual journey, but they're doing all of these things, but it may not be what they need. So they're just like doing things, but they're not actually really getting results because they're not digging in deep and handling those beliefs. They're like, everything is like love, everything's like love, but they don't go into the shadow part, right?
There's definitely and I think that's a separate conversation in itself. Is just the positivity washing over the human experience that is very messy and very juicy in itself. Yes. And also I find that it's more than just like not doing, like a lot of people are doing things, but we have all this knowledge. The amount of people that I have that come and sit in my office that have so much knowledge, they're brilliant, and they've really gone in and they've put in this genuine effort to learn all these different things. And like you said, but it's not doing anything about it, because we forget about the embodiment part of this journey, right? So there is the education in this program, but there's also the embodiment, that actually going through the exercises, actually going through the somatic part of it, because a lot of trauma lives inside the body and the cells. We've done all this work mentally, but we haven't learned how to connect it into the heart for coherence. We haven't learned how to connect it and move it through the body, which is where where the biggest amounts of density sit, right? This is how it's the physical realm.
Well, and that's how it manifests into diseases and stuff,
Right.
which, science is finally catching up to what, shamans and people have known from ancient times, right? That's where disease comes from. And I found it interesting that actually the guys who used to go to war, I don't know if you knew this, but they used to go to war and then they would have to spend 2 months with the shaman when they returned to actually purge out all of that trauma and all of that PTSD and everything. So like they knew back then what needed to happen, but we somehow evolved out of all of these things, right?
It's interesting. I actually didn't know that, but I do know that things like breath work and somatic releasing and a lot of the work that we do within this program has been highly effective for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that includes people who have been in more frontline working with like either the military, firefighters, policemen, and
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of this. So like if anyone out there feels value in, this program or any of the work that Jade does, you can call us here at Clair-i-tea and we'll put you in touch and get you all hooked up with that. So she's here this weekend. Actually, today is the 2nd and 3rd. So if there's any of the modalities that she does that you'd like to book, please give us a call, or you're welcome to use our online booking system as well. And even if you want a consultation about the inner child work, I'm sure that Jade offers that as well as the program. So, come on in, and she's a wealth of knowledge and experience in many different things. So thank you so much for joining us, Jade, today.
Thank you for having me. And we'll also be back here on the 16th, 17th,
Yes.
and we have the sound bath with light language with
Yes.
Kelly Wolf as well.
Yes.
And last time we did that sold out pretty quickly. So definitely jump in if that's something that you're interested in. And
It is limited seating.
It is
so there's
limited
only
seating.
15 tickets, and we're already a third of the way sold out.
okay,
So,
perfect.
It is a magical evening. I experienced it, and I tell you, that's why I asked for her to do it again, because it was so amazing.
It was
Yeah.
so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And the Inner Child container for October is 50% full now. So definitely jump in on that if it's something that you're interested in. You can just contact Kris or myself directly.
Well, she also has the early bird pricing until the end of August. So if
I
you're going
do.
to jump in, I would advise you to take advantage of the early bird
100%.
pricing for sure.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to sign off and say goodbye. God bless.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you guys again soon.